You're listening
to the CD Baby
CD Baby
DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 137 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast. My name is Kevin Bruner, your host for the show, and today you're going to hear from Shanta Thake, the director of Joe's Pub in New York City. Joe's Pub at the Public is one of New York City's most celebrated venues for emerging and established performance artists. Named for public theater founder Joe Papp, Joe's Pub debuted in 1998 and plays a vital role in the Public's mission of supporting young artists while providing established artists with an intimate space to perform and develop new work. They book an astonishing 800 shows a year, many of which are performances by independent artists of all genres. If you're an artist trying to get the attention of club bookers or book a tour, you're going to find lots of useful info in this interview. So let's get to it. Well, joining me on the line is Shanta Thake. Shanta, how are you?
I'm doing great.
You are the director at Joe's Pub, and which is a venue there in New York City. Why don't you start out by telling us about yourself, your history in the music business, and how you ended up at Joe's Pub, and about the venue, because it's kind of a unique venue.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working at Joe's for about 12 years, and I have been the director here since late 2007, so about 7 years that I've been the director of the space. And I also am one of the co-producers of Global Fest, which is a world music festival and nonprofit service organization for world music, international music, that really tries to bring that type of music based in traditional forms, into the mainstream in North America. So those are sort of my two day-to-day roles. And how I got started at Joe's was really, I had always had a deep love of music and theater, and went to school for theater. But when I moved to New York, realized that I did not want to be an actress, and at the same time, really fell in love with being sort of behind the scenes at the theater, and realized how creative it could be to work in administration, which doesn't sound that glamorous, but I really actually loved it. And being around all the artists that I loved. And once I realized that, I knew that I would prefer to work in music, where the pace is a little bit faster in terms of how you get to a show. And I felt like the emotion behind the music was just so much more immediate that I wanted to be more a part of that world. And Joe's Pub is a unique venue because it's part of the Public Theater. The Public is a large nonprofit theater in downtown New York. And there are 5 other theaters in the building, and then Joe's Pub, which is its music venue. So we are nonprofit, which is one big difference than most clubs around the country. And we're also guided by this mission of the Public Theater, which is multifaceted, but really, what the piece that we take of it is really to reflect sort of the diversity of the city of New York, and on our stages, whether that's through the type of music that we present, or the where artists are within their career, and really try to get the biggest diversity on our stage as we can, and really also try to work with artists and figure out with them what the best way to build their careers, and make it much more of a long-term relationship than just one-off shows.
Well, cool. Well, I'm excited to have you on the podcast, because it's been years since we've talked to somebody who worked at a venue, worked with booking bands and artists, and a lot has changed in the industry. But also, you guys are a very unique venue. By the way, I'm curious. I've seen pictures of the venue online, and it looks like an amazing room. Is there some sort of history beyond Joe's Pub for that room, or was it built in '98?
It was before that room was Joe's Pub. It was really like an administration building, and the entrance to the building for the Public Theater. So like I said, there's 5 other theaters in the building, and this was just sort of a big room where, there was sort of a front desk and people would come in, and it was where office supplies were stored. And then they did a big campaign with the city to raise money for a couple things in the building. And one of those was Joe's Pub. And when they realized that there were sort of 3 columns in the room, but not one where where you would normally expect one. So there was sort of a columnless area of the room. And the artistic director at the time, George Wolfe, remembers walking into that room and thinking, "Oh my God, there should be a stage there. We got to fit it in." So it really did start in 1998 as this, cabaret space within the building.
Wow. Well, they did a great job with it because the photos I saw online, it looked just like a really cool classic venue that could have been there for years and years. That just the way it's laid out and set up, I thought would make it a very enjoyable place to see a band and also a great place to play as an artist. So. Oh
yeah, definitely. It's very intimate and it's definitely a listening room. People don't come to just like chat with their friends while a show is going on. It's really, you're there to listen to the music or see the show. It's, I have artists tell me all the time that it feels like that's a room where they have literally everyone's attention, even the wait staff. You got to convince them to keep doing their jobs.
So, as the director, what are your day-to-day duties and as far as like involvement with bringing in the talent, and I guess you should also talk about the kinds of shows you guys do, because you guys do a wide variety of programming, and the way you run it's a little different than the average club as well.
Yeah, my responsibility is really to maintain this sort of vision and make sure that we're staying on mission for Joe's Pub. And what that means in reality is looking at our calendar, looking at the way we're marketing ourselves, and make sure that it's clear that we're really trying to be as artist forward as we can be, and that we're giving as much equal attention as possible to we'll have anywhere from 12 to 18 shows a week. How are we positioning those artists and those shows in a way that makes it feel like they're each getting their own attention, and that we're really taking care of these shows? And on the booking side, I work with our associate director, and we're looking at the calendar daily and sort of going through and looking at the artists that we have held on dates, making sure that we are maintaining the sort of variety of genre, and also looking at whether it's all established artists or regional touring artists, or if there are some emerging artists within that we're making sure that we're finding a place for them as well. And then the quality, really maintaining the quality of the artists that we're putting on our stage from any genre, and making sure that also the lights and sound are at their highest level. So I'm sort of meeting with my staff regularly just to make sure that we are doing what we say we do, which is to have this great sound and lights and great production value while having, the best of whatever genre we are presenting, and being able to talk about it in a way that's appropriate.
Well, you said 2 things there that that kind of send us down 2 different paths that I want to chase after a little bit, get a little more details. But one of them being that you mentioned the idea of what you're doing to give each show kind of its attention, the artist that it needs to, what they need to get the word out and all that. What, as a club booker, I kind of want to go down the route a bit of talking about what your role and what you think the venue's role should be in that. I know that's kind of a sore subject for a lot of artists when they play clubs and such. They feel like, why isn't the club doing anything to care about this show, and just kind of expecting me to bring everything to the table, or at least that's how they feel. That's how it gets perceived a lot. And the other thing you mentioned that we can go down the road a little bit is how you curate and put on shows, and some of the more details about how you bring in artists and such. But as far as the venue itself, how do you see your role is helping spread the word, and what are the typical things you do per show in order to help get the word out there about what's going on there?
Yeah, it changes all the time, and so we're trying to figure that out as well, which I think artists also, I think when you're an artist, you're expected to also be a marketing expert and a business manager, and that's the hardest thing about being an artist, is that you're expected to basically be able to run a successful business and do every single piece of that very well. And it's exhausting, and it's, I think, not appropriate for an artist to expect our artists to be experts in all those fields. That's what we're hired to do. So, we have this issue, not issue, but the reality of volume. And I have one person on my staff doing press. I have one person doing marketing. And there are, how many gajillion ways that you can promote your show, whether that's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. There's new ways of using social media every day. And so what we're trying to do is what we try to do is ask the artists for all the tools that they can give us up front. So what is your Instagram name? What's your Twitter name? What is your, give us a high-res image. Please, God, give us a high-res image. That is one big piece of advice.
It's amazing how hard it is to get that from artists sometimes.
Oh, God, it's so hard. And it's the only way that we can really help you in a lot of cases. And then getting, the media that we need. And we ask for that up front. And a lot of times it takes a while to get all that information. And once we have it, though, it's really helpful just in terms of building the page for you. We have a pretty robust website that has all of that media on there per artist and can really build something that looks really cool and artists can be proud of sending out. And so we really try to provide that. And then we look at the shows. Some artists are more established. They're going to sell out the show easily. We're not going to spend as much time on those. Some artists have their own publicists. We just are trying to touch base with them and see, what can we do? What can you do? And then the rest of the artists, which is a majority, I would say, we're really looking at, okay, what is a story that we can tell? Do we have a lot of country music this year, or this month? So let's try to group those artists together and get it out to our country list. And again, I think we're in a different position than I think a lot of clubs in that we have a really robust database. We have a lot of information on who our audience is and what they've gone to, which is not the case for a lot of these small clubs where it's one, person basically running the show. Mm-hmm. And so that can be really difficult. So just from the club perspective, I think I'm also happen to be fortunate in the way that we are staffed up to at least we have the tools to be able to help in a different way. And then, of course, we're talking to the artist and we need to know who is your audience, we're not just going to have, 200 people show up to a band they've never heard of. We need to know, we need help in finding the right people. And we're going to try to set you up for success anyway. We don't want, and it's not in any club's interest to have a band that can't sell tickets. Mm-hmm. So once we book you, the idea is we believe in you enough to think that you should have an audience. So if you can't find that audience, we certainly are going to help you try to find it in whatever way we can. And when I hire people, that's a big part of the conversation is that every artist that comes in should feel like you are their marketing manager. You are their publicist. You are not just a publicist that happens to work at a venue that you're playing at. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think that's probably more unique than it should be. But that's certainly, I think, an ideal that people should try to aspire to, and something that we're aspiring to. It doesn't always happen, but we try to at least do something for every artist that's on our stage.
I know you book a lot of independent artists. Are a lot of those artists coming from the New York City area, or you have a healthy amount of people that are just on tour from other places?
I would say a lot are from New York, just based on who we're seeing, who we're going out to see in smaller venues or venues where there's just, a bucket being passed around or whatever. The shows that we're seeing on a regular, we meaning my staff that are out and about every day, those tend to be New York City artists, mm-hmm. Just because they can actually afford to play like that or, can need to play out more often in the venues that we go to that are cheaper. Mm-hmm. And, but we have a fair amount of touring acts that are emerging. But what we would do with them is, generally speaking, we'd put them on a split bill or see if we can pair them with somebody that can help get an audience for them, unless they haven't established. But in terms of independent, like having no agent or manager, it's a little bit harder just to have access to those bands and be able to find those audiences for them. Mm-hmm. But we do it all the time. I mean, it definitely happens. We're talking to an artist right now that's coming in from Colombia that we're trying to figure out, okay, how can we really get if we book this show, we want to make sure that, so we're finding another Colombian band from that's based in New York, and working with a publicist that works with Latin American press a lot more often, and bringing her on to help us sort of think of the different people we can reach out to about that show.
That kind of leads into the other half of the equation I wanted to talk about, and how you guys go about getting artists. I don't think you mentioned the amount of shows you guys are doing. I know when we talked like last week, you mentioned that you were doing a lot, and the variety of genres that you do. Why don't you talk a little bit about that to kind of give some perspective to the kind of artists you guys have on a typical basis?
Yeah, we book about 700 to 800 shows a year, closer to 800. And of those shows, I would say we do a lot of, cabaret type music. So little sort of mixed genre theater music. The room is a cabaret room, so it sort of lends itself to that. And there's a really vibrant scene in New York for that. We do a lot of singer-songwriters, world music, jazz. We don't do as much of, because there's so many jazz venues in the city that sort of only do that. But we really do try to do at least a little bit of everything. Heavy stuff doesn't really fit that well in Joe's, so we don't do a lot of that. But we do gospel choirs. We've got performance artists. Really a mix of everything. A lot of R&B lately, and some hip hop. But we're always trying to look at that when we're looking at our calendar, and make sure that we don't have a week of just like white singer-songwriters. But also making sure that we don't have 2 months where we don't have any white singer-songwriters. Yeah. So looking at sort of who is the audience, how do we really make many different communities feel like Joe's Pub is a place that they can go and see something that's going to affect them in some way.
And it's probably worth noting that it's also a venue where a lot of very big mainstream artists like to come and do special events as well, because it's such a cool, intimate room that you've had numerous type events there based around like a major artist doing a smaller performance for some, like a release or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We really try to do to be a space, I think, because of how intimate the room is and how artists feel really comfortable in the room, that we talk to established artists and their teams a lot about, why don't you, if you have a new project that you don't necessarily want to debut at Madison Square Garden, maybe you want to do that at Joe's Pub and get the critical mass around. Maybe you invite the New York Times and all the press you want there, and your fan club, and we've had a lot of success with that. And that, to me, is really exciting, to have those type of artists working on that type of work, whether that's Pete Townsend doing, this In the Attic series with his wife, Rachel. Amy Winehouse did her U.S. debut at Joe's Pub. Adele did her U.S. debut at Joe's Pub. Tenarwin did their U.S. debut at Joe's Pub. So it's also just a great room to have sort of that big, splashy New York show. But we also, Dan Wilson is here this week from Semisonic, who's also just an incredible songwriter. And he's just working on sort of this new idea of a show, which is called Words and Music. And it's him telling stories about how he wrote these songs. He wrote songs with Adele and the Dixie Chicks, and what that process is like for him, and just telling these amazing sort of behind the scenes stories. So it's not a Semisonic concert. It's not just Dan Wilson singing for an hour and a half. It's really this different experience. And for him, Joe's Pub is a perfect fit for something like that. Whereas if he comes back through with a different project that's just him singing, maybe Joe's Pub is not where he wants to try that out, because he can, just do that and feel very comfortable doing that in front of anyone.
Yeah. You said that you are doing over 800 shows a year, which is a ton. And I mentioned when we talked in the past how you do like 3 shows a night, and somebody plays and you clear the room, then there's a show at a later time. You must be booking or going through an enormous amount of material in order to book that many artists.
Yes.
Tell us about that process. and that's where, artists always have a ton of questions, like, how do we get you to listen to us And so just tell us how that process works for Joe's Pub.
Yeah, I mean, basically, myself and our associate director get about, I would say, between 200 and 300 emails a day. And that's on, obviously not all of those are about booking, but a significant portion of them are. And it's about using the filters that we have. So the agents that we trust, the managers that we like, if they're referencing other artists that we know of, that's all really helpful. Anything to sort of narrow the field a little bit and allow us to sort of hear your music without hearing it in a way. And then the next step, once we get past that initial thing, is to actually listen to the music. So we won't book anyone without actually hearing the music. So if you write us and say, we sell 150 tickets and a ton of drinks, that is of really no interest to me if I don't like the music. And we try to keep a real open mind as far as that's concerned, because obviously I don't want just my taste to dictate what I think the rest of New York City wants to hear. But really looking at the material and being able to get a sense of, is this a fit for us? But the first step is really like figuring out who your filters are and who are, even if you've never performed in New York before, do you know like a certain community that will come out to the show? Do you have a band that somebody else that in New York that you've worked with all the time that would put in a good word for you, or you can put their name in the subject line, friend of so and so. That's to us incredibly valuable, and it's really impossible to respond to everybody every day. It's just not going to happen. So I would say on top of that, really persistence is, unfortunately for all of us, the way to do it. And that means just, if you don't hear a response, it doesn't mean that we hate your music. It just means we probably haven't read your email, or we just haven't gotten to it yet. And that's just sort of the plight of being on this side of things, is just the overwhelming quantity of things to listen to and respond to. And it's a great problem to have, but it's a problem nonetheless. And if you can help us out by just making sure that you're sort of front and center in our lives. And I guarantee you, if somebody emails me, 10 times over the course of the year, eventually I'm going to figure out how to get them in if I like the music. And even if it's just for an opening slot, or figuring out, another venue that I think they might be a good fit for, that will happen eventually. It's just unfortunate that it sometimes takes a while to break through.
Do you ever respond with feedback saying, look, I don't think your music's going to fit at our club, and it's okay if you stop emailing us? Those emails are really hard to write, because it's obviously you don't want to like crush someone's dream. But I think it's important to know, as a band or as an artist, my opinion, the opinion of a venue, is not the be all end all. It just means that it's not a good fit. And people email us all the time with bands that you're like, why are you wasting both of our times with this? We are not a fit for you. This doesn't make any sense. You have played in New York. The email will be like, we're a heavy metal group. We sell 20 tickets, and we're awesome. We're going to be, in your neighborhood at this time. And it's like, well, that to me is not, you're not understanding where we are in the marketplace, or how you would fit into what we do. And there's a million venues in New York. I also get a ton of emails that are just where they copy every venue in New York. And that's another way of being like, well, that one's just deleted. But I would say, we send emails to people all the time that are just like, this isn't a fit for us right now, but keep us updated with where you're playing in New York. And that's something that I think people rarely do that. Once we send that email out, I rarely hear from people again. It's like, here's when I'm playing again. Yeah.
And we mean that, we go see music. That's our job. So we would like to see your band if it happens to be on a night where we're not seeing another band, or it makes sense. So I would say to keep us in the loop, so that when it is appropriate, we're there and we can be around. But we send emails like that all the time. I won't ever say, I don't like your band. But I will say this doesn't feel like a fit for us right now. And, stay in touch or don't.
Well, you said something that was interesting, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone say before, but the idea of inviting the club booker to your show at another venue.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea. But I could tell you that a lot of artists, they start to get frustrated thinking that I understand not answering email. I mean, because I'm in the same boat here at CD Baby with the amount of email I get. It's like sometimes it's just like, I'm sorry, I want to go home and see my family at some point.
Right.
But it's good to hear you say that you're not getting angered by someone's persistence, as long as they're being respectful and understanding that the kind of position you're in with how much volume you get.
Yeah, and I've had definitely artists that have written back and been like, oh, God forbid you actually respond to my email, or after like the third time, and they're putting it in the email, the subject of the email, third try.
Oh, that's
like,
so
okay,
irritating.
man, I get it, but it's certainly, I would love to be able to respond to everyone, and I do hope that that's how everybody feels, because it is our job to respond to the people that want to play here, and but again, we have a lot of people that don't really know about the venue at all, that just want to play a venue. And I think it's also important to know one thing to definitely sort of hone as you're an artist is, what are the venues that make sense for me? Learn about the venues in your town, learn about the venues in other towns that you want to tour to, and what's the right space for your type of music and your band, and so that you're not just emailing 30 people over and over again. You should only be emailing like the 2 people that it actually makes sense for you to email. And then also knowing how to approach them in a way that makes them open your email.
As far as bands that are outside of the New York area, does it make a difference to you if they're on a tour? I know for us that aren't in New York City, it seems like this really challenging place to get into as an outsider. But if you see a band that's, for whatever reason, their email catches your eye, you open it, they're saying, hey, we're on tour, trying to find a New York date, and then you check out the music and you like it. Is that something that helps, like knowing that they're on tour, or doesn't even matter to you guys?
That doesn't really matter to us, because we're just one spot within. The only thing that matters is really the range of dates and how available the band is. Mm-hmm. So, if they're only available on one date, obviously the chances of being able to fit it in on that exact date are not as good. But I would say that being on tour, to me, doesn't jump out at me as being something that I would like automatically get into. Okay. And would change my perspective on the band at all. It would really be about, again, like, why does this band make sense at Joe's Pub, and what are the angles that we can push from our side and from their side in terms of who do they already know in New York? What's past history like? What are other people that they have connections to, or different things that are going on in their world, whether it's, having a new album out, or having some new thing to talk about. Yeah. Just what is the story? Like, why are you? Because New York is, where you're going to get your press and where you're going to get it's a big moment on a tour, or otherwise. So what is it about this performance that's going to be special, so that we can help see the story around it, so that we can make sure that it's a success.
Now, since you guys do up to like 3 shows an evening, are those typically just solo shows in the sense that there's just one act for each show, or are you building a bill? And partly the reason I ask is because I know that sometimes artists, and I've had this happen to me with some of my projects, have had success by putting together a bill and going to a venue saying, hey, we're friends with this band and this band. We've all played all these shows, and here's a really strong bill, and we know that this combination can pack it out. And
yeah, I think that's great. That's always a good thing. I mean, for us, I think more so than most, we're a little more challenged in that way because of the time restrictions. You know, we have like a 7 o'clock, a 9:30, and an 11:30. So you're talking about 90 to 70 minute sets. And if you're the way we package things generally is either like an opening artist for 20 minutes and then the headliner for an hour, or we do a split bill with like 45 minutes each. And yeah, I think that's absolutely certainly helps.
Okay.
In terms of figuring out the viability of a band.
Well, I found on your website that part of the mission is supporting young artists. And I'm kind of curious, since you guys are a nonprofit, how some of the deal structures might work, especially with the independent artists. I know you've got a lot of independent music you're booking. And one of the hot topics here in the independent artist community in general is how independent artists tend to be treated by venues, whether it's they have to pay in order to play, like pre-sale tickets, or getting kind of second-class citizen treatment compared to, like a bigger tour. So I'm just kind of curious how a typical deal might be structured at Joe's Pub as far as what you pay, what the artist should expect, the kind of maybe some of your thoughts and opinions even on that subject.
Yeah, we don't do any sort of pay for play situation at Joe's. And if we book you, we sort of stand behind you. And we're pretty democratic, or I don't even know if democratic is the right word, socialist in the way that we approach it, in terms of like basically everyone gets the same deal, which is a door split based on a ticket price. So if your ticket price is lower, your split's a little bit lower. If your ticket price is higher, your split's a little bit higher. And that's what we do across the board. It doesn't matter if you're Pete Townsend or, you are a solo guitar player that has like had one gig in your life and you're opening for another artist. That's our deal. So in that way, I think we really are working to pay our artists more all the time. I feel like it's so difficult to be a musician. And that's a reality that we're trying to work within and try to help and really improve when we can. But the realities of it are that, what we do now is door split, and that's the same no matter who you are. And we don't do, there's no minimums for artists. There's no bar minimums. And we provide all the tech and support, so the lights, the sound, and a sound check and tech is all part of just getting booked. There's no payment for any of that. So nothing really comes off the top.
That's very nice.
And we feel like that's a good starting place for an artist and allows people at least the chance to really be successful without having them actually lose significant amounts of money on the date. Although, of course, we know the realities of actually paying all your band members and what that means when you don't sell out the room. And so, again, I think it's something that we're trying to work to get better at and look at a guarantee structure and what we could do there, even if it's just a minimum per person. But right now we're working within this fee structure unless we raise a lot more money to help another model emerge. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah. It sounds very, very fair. I mean, a lot of artists, the door split tends to be pretty common, but a lot of times it's the door split, but then you get the list. Oh, we had to pay the sound man this. We had to. Right. There was I don't think they do it anymore, but a venue here in Portland where you'd get the settlement sheet, settle up at the end of the night, and there would be $150 for catering, and catering was literally a bowl of chips, some salsa, and like a 12-pack of PBR. It's grand total of like $8, and you're paying $150 for it.
That's a great idea. Thanks for.
All right, no more. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. I don't want to get.
So the other thing that I should just mention is that we also are looking at different ways of working with our artists, which is like we're starting an artist in residence program. So where we really I don't want to use the word mentor because that sounds like there's sort of a higher hierarchy within that, which it's not really that, but bringing in artists and allowing them to set up meetings with the people that they want to meet with, whether that's if they're looking for agencies or they're looking for a manager, if they want to just set up their website and they can't afford to set up a website. So we've been like really working on this program to have artists in residence that are generally, you know, local artists that we work with all the time that we really want to help get to the next level. And then we also do a commissioning program for artists that we are trying to pair them with theater artists and have them create new works of theater. And so those are different ways that we have tried to, one, address the crumbling music industry, you know, in its last form, and try to allow artists new tools of figuring out how to make a living, you know, in this new world. That isn't, or that, you know, now that the model is based around a live show and, you know, how to get their material out to the right people and have these connections with their fans, how can we help facilitate that and help their live show and help all of those pieces. And then, and also trying to get them to be able to have a different, be able to access the world of funding that theater and dance have, but that music really doesn't have, in terms of nonprofit grants for theater work. And that I think a lot of musicians just don't know about.
Oh, yeah, that is interesting since you guys are tied in that way. Because I know, like in Canada, it's pretty common for artists to get grants and such.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But here in the States, that's a foreign concept to musicians. Before, I had a couple last questions. One of them, I'm curious, as somebody who's running a venue and booking artists, and what are a few things, or just one, or something that you see artists doing that drives you crazy, both before booking, like before you've booked the show, and after the show, like day of the show, when things are going down. What are the things that artists do that you wish you could say, please don't do that because now's your chance? You have the podium.
I think there's not a lot that I would say are across the board annoyances. The ones that I've already mentioned, like really making sure you have high res images is so key. We can't really, it's shocking how little you can do if you don't have a high res image in terms of getting press placement and getting anything on our website and getting people to actually, you know, we make our own posters here. We can't make a poster of your band if there's no image. So I think that's one thing that I would just say is a good starting point. Annoying things, I would say, I don't know.
Come on.
I know. I feel like I should bring in Ben, who's our artist relations manager, because he's always on the front line of that. But I think, you know, attitude is everything, right? So we're here to work for you and with you. But when an artist comes in and is really sort of angry from the start about everything that's ever happened, whether it's a guest list issue or, you know, nobody like helped them carry in an amp or who knows, you know, but I think really how you approach a venue staff is so important, and how, you know, we have interns that work here that also like fill out reports on like, how did a show go? And if the artist is rude to them, that goes into that report that we just have forever, you know, so that the next time that artist wants to play, we're looking at that report and being like, oh yeah, but that guy was such a jerk to our like 19-year-old intern for no reason, and didn't, you know, and demanded more drink tickets than we could give. And, you know, and for the most part, I think being just delightful in any situation like that is will go a long way and certainly helps. And I think also, you know, I hate to put this burden on an artist, but I think also saying thank you after an event also happens very rarely. And it's nice. It's so nice to get a note from an artist that says, hey, that went really well, or this went great and this could have been better, or I didn't get why my dressing room was on the first floor, but thanks for everything. Will also go such a long way in terms of coming back to that venue. And I think you work so hard to get a gig, and then when you get one, hold on to that person, that contact. That can be your, tour forever if you play it right. And if you are we have an artist who sold like 30 tickets the last time he played here, but he was so nice to everyone and the show was awesome. We worked really hard to get people out and it didn't work for that. But he was like the most delightful human. And now we're just trying to figure out any way we can get him back in the room the next time he's in town. And how we can make it better and what we can do to make sure that the next show is a better show for all of us. So those are, I guess,
that's great advice because I can tell you are correct at how it's shocking how few times artists actually say thank you. And they're in a position where they're asking for a lot. And sometimes as an artist, you feel kind of beaten down because you don't get
absolutely.
responses. But when you do, be kind, be grateful, and say thank you. When I was in a band that was signed, our manager made us send thank you notes to anybody we encountered on a professional level that day, whether it be just going into a store and doing an in-store or radio or whatever. And so every day we were filling out all these thank you notes.
That's amazing.
Was
a good manager.
we got so many second gigs because of that. People would be like, in my 20 years in the music business, no one's ever thanked me.
No, it's true. And learning people's names. I mean, it's the same doing anything, but it's obviously harder when you're traveling from city to city every single day and are tired and your hotel was horrible and all those things.
Yeah, I as an artist, there are plenty of reasons to be cranky. I can say, but yeah, I mean, it is something good for artists to remember that you're a human being that's doing a job, and you want artists at your venue, and you're going to want to work with artists that are easy to work with and memorable and fun to be around. And so it's good to hear that from someone who's having to deal with it day in and day out. Well, the only other thing I was curious about is just, what an artist, even just getting into the New York scene outside of New York, if there's any venues or any advice on how to start. It just, for us that aren't in New York City, it seems like its own world that it just, whenever someone says, oh, I'm going to be playing New York City, it's like, ooh, they got a New York City date. I don't know if it seems like that to you living there, but.
No, it doesn't. That's really nice to hear, I guess. I would say, again, I think like in most things, it's really about who you know and how deep that connection is. And you really, it takes it takes like one person that that knows somebody who is connected to somebody who works at a venue, or who has played at that venue before, or has, babysat for somebody that's played at that venue before. And I think really figuring out who are your New York people, who are your connections, and like, how can they help you in a really direct way, is the way to do it. And then as far as venues, I mean, there's this thing called the Live Guide, I think, Live Music Venue Guide, that I have in my office. That's like a great listing of all the venues and sort of their capacity and what they do and what types of music they do and sort of the general deals, which is really great. And
that's called the Live Music. Is that something that's available?
It's called, let's see, I'm just pulling it off my shelf. A Guide to Live Music Venues, New York City.
Interesting.
Not sure if they still put it out, but it's the website that I have here is firstliveguide.com.
Huh.
And it's pretty great.
That's actually very helpful because even just tracking down venues is hard enough.
Yeah, and it's got lots of teeny tiny venues and Radio City Music Hall and like your coffee shop.
So artists can get that guide and spam everybody.
Exactly. So that's a good one. I mean, that's been out for a while, so I'm not sure how useful that is. But I would say really using any contact you have, because that's how we're at least starting the conversation.
Yeah,
is through, and honestly, a lot through artists. It's I book a ton of people that I know through another artist that plays at Joe's Pub regularly, and that's that's sort of my easiest way of sort of associating. And that also tells me like, oh, you're friends with so-and-so. Well, I bet maybe all of that person's fans that come see them at Joe's Pub will come to this show, or we can talk about how we're co-promoting on that list. And it just gives me a head start in terms of thinking about what you sound like and how to interact with people that may want to buy tickets to your show.
Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I'm sure another 100 emails piled up while you were recording this podcast. And after this podcast goes live, you'll probably have several thousand more. But I really appreciate you taking time out and, just sharing some of your expertise and advice to artists. And next time in New York City, definitely going to stop by Joe's Pub. The photos just make it look like an amazing place to see music. And so thank you so much.
Thank you. I can't wait to see you in New York.
That brings us to the tail end of another episode. If you have any thoughts, comments, or tips you want to share about booking shows or planning a tour, we'd love to hear them. You can email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com, or you can call our listener line at 360-524-2209, or you can leave a comment on the show notes for this episode located at cdbabypodcast.com. You never know, we might just share your comments on the podcast. Well, that's going to do it. We'll catch you next time. You've been listening to the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, broadcasting from Portland, Oregon, USA.